The warning buoys around Sol System had stopped working thousands of years ago. Nobody remembered why they were put there in the first place. The old records were locked away, and the species who had made the decision to quarantine this small corner of the galaxy had died out long before anyone could ask them why. Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the distant yellow star on his viewing screen. It was a small star, unremarkable in every way. The third planet from this star held a primitive species called humans. They had only recently learned to leave their own world, and their tiny space stations and simple rockets were laughable compared to the technology of the hegemony ascendant. Vorath had conquered 400 star systems in his career. He had broken empires and enslaved entire civilizations. When he looked at Earth, he saw only opportunity. Fresh water, heavy metals, 8 billion potential slaves who would work in hegemony mines and factories until they died. The Galactic Concord had rules about quarantined worlds. Vorath did not care about rules. The Concord was weak, and the hegemony was strong. That was the only truth that mattered in the universe. His armada consisted of 300 warships. Each one could crack a planet open like an egg. Each one carried thousands of soldiers trained in the art of planetary conquest. This would be an easy victory. The operation would take less than a week. Vorath gave the order, and his fleet translated into real space beyond the orbit of the largest gas giant in the system. Standard procedure required sending scouts first, so he dispatched a dozen small vessels toward the inner planets. The scouts reported back within hours. Their findings confirmed everything Vorath had expected. The humans had no unified government. They were divided into many nations that constantly fought each other over resources and territory. Their weapons were primitive. Their defensive capabilities were non-existent. They had no idea that alien life existed, let alone that an invasion fleet had arrived in their system. One scout commander noted something strange in his report. He said that his sensors had detected unusual readings from the planet's crust, as if something vast and dormant lay sleeping beneath the surface. Vorath dismissed this as a malfunction. Primitive worlds often had strange geological activity. The admiral ordered his scouts to move closer and begin detailed surveillance of population centers. He wanted to know where the humans kept their leaders, where their communication networks were based, and where the best landing zones for his ground forces would be. The scout ships entered Earth's orbital space. They stopped transmitting. Vorath waited for an hour, then 2 hours, then 5. He sent urgent requests for status updates. He received nothing but silence in return. The admiral was not worried. Communications equipment failed sometimes. Perhaps there was some kind of interference from Earth's magnetic field or its primitive satellites. He ordered a second wave of scouts to investigate. The second wave reached Earth orbit and found the first wave of ships still there. They were intact. Their systems were still running. But their crews were gone. Not dead. Not floating in space. Simply gone. As if they had never existed in the first place. The second wave commander reported this finding with fear in his voice. Before Vorath could respond, that commander and his entire crew also vanished. The ships remained, but every living being aboard them had disappeared without a trace. For the first time in many years, Admiral Vorath felt uncertain. He had fought enemies who used strange weapons and unusual tactics. He had never encountered anything like this. There had been no weapons fire, no energy signatures, no indication of any attack at all. His soldiers had simply ceased to exist. He pulled up the ancient records from the Galactic Concord database. Most of the files about Sol System were corrupted or locked behind security protocols that no longer had valid access codes. But he found one fragment of text, written in a language so old that his translation systems struggled to decode it. The fragment said, "Do not wake them. Let them sleep. For all our sakes, let them sleep." Vorath stared at these words for a long time. Who was them? The humans? They were primitive apes who had barely discovered fire a few thousand years ago. What threat could they possibly pose to a civilization that had conquered half the galaxy? He decided that the warning was superstition. Ancient species often feared what they did not understand. The disappearance of his scouts was troubling, but it could be explained. Perhaps the humans had developed some kind of defense system that his intelligence had missed. Perhaps there was another spacefaring civilization hiding in this system that the hegemony did not know about. Whatever the explanation, Vorath would find it and destroy it. He was the greatest military commander the hegemony had ever produced. He would not be stopped by mystery and shadows. He gave the order for his entire armada to advance toward Earth. 300 warships began moving through the darkness of space, their weapons charging, their soldiers preparing for battle. This would not be a surgical strike anymore. This would be total war. On the planet below, 8 billion humans continued their lives without knowing what was coming. They went to work and came home. They ate dinner with their families. They laughed and cried and dreamed small dreams about small things. They had no idea that they were about to be invaded by an alien empire that had never known defeat. They also had no idea what they truly were. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in places that no human had ever seen and no human mind could comprehend, something stirred. It was not awake, not yet, but it was aware, in some dim and distant way, that something was approaching, something that meant harm to the small, fragile creatures walking on the world above. The something had been sleeping for a very long time. It had chosen to sleep, chosen to forget, chosen to become small and weak and mortal. It had wanted to know what fear felt like, what hope felt like, what it meant to struggle against impossible odds. Now, for the first time in millions of years, it began to remember. In cities across Earth, random people suddenly looked up at the sky. They did not know why. They felt a strange sensation, like a word on the tip of their tongue that they could not quite speak. Then the feeling passed, and they returned to their lives, thinking nothing of it. Admiral Voreth's fleet drew closer. The sleepers began to dream of war. Commander Yethra had served the hegemony for 60 years. She had watched worlds burn. She had walked through the ruins of civilizations that had dared to resist. She thought she had seen everything that the universe had to offer. She was wrong. Her assault carrier reached Earth orbit ahead of the main fleet. Admiral Voreth had ordered her to investigate the disappearance of the scout ships and to establish a landing zone for the ground invasion. It should have been a simple mission. The scout ships floated silently in orbit, exactly where they had been when they stopped transmitting. Yethra ordered her technicians to scan them for damage, radiation, biological contamination, anything that might explain what had happened to their crews. They found nothing. The ships were in perfect condition. Life support systems were running. Food was still warm in the mess halls. Personal belongings sat undisturbed in crew quarters. It was as if every living being on those ships had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. Yethra felt cold fear creeping up her spine, but she pushed it down. Fear was weakness, and she had not survived 60 years of military service by being weak. There had to be a rational explanation. She would find it. She ordered a ground assault. Standard subjugation protocol required seizing communication centers and eliminating enemy leadership first. Her tactical officers identified a large population center in the northern part of one continent. The humans called it Moscow. It was cold there, covered in snow, but her soldiers were trained to fight in any environment. 12 dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere. They cut through clouds and wind and emerged above a vast city of gray buildings and frozen streets. The ships landed in a large open plaza in the center of the city, their engines melting the snow beneath them. 5,000 hegemony soldiers emerged from the dropships with weapons raised. They formed into combat formations and prepared to advance. Their armor made them look like metal giants, and their energy rifles could cut through stone walls like paper. Nobody attacked them. Yethra watched through orbital cameras as her soldiers stood in the plaza, waiting for resistance that never came. The humans had not fled. She could see them in windows, standing on distant streets, watching from doorways, thousands of them, all completely still, all staring at the invaders with expressions she could not read. Then she noticed the silence. There should have been noise. Cities made noise. Vehicles, voices, machines, wind, all the sounds of civilization going about its business. But within a perfect circle around her landing zone, there was nothing. Absolute silence. As if sound itself had been forbidden from entering that space. The silence was broken by singing. It started quietly, so quietly that the soldiers' audio sensors almost missed it. Children's voices, rising from somewhere in the city, singing a melody that had no words. The song was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It made Yethra think of things she had not thought about in decades. Her mother's voice, the smell of her homeworld's oceans, the face of a friend who had died in battle long ago. The song was not in any human language. It was not in any language that existed in the hegemony's databases. It was older than language itself. a sound that had existed before there were ears to hear it. Jethro watched her soldiers' life signs on her tactical display. One by one, they began to wink out. Not violently, not with the sudden flat line of death by weapon or explosion. Gently, softly, like candles being blown out by a quiet breath. She screamed into her communicator, ordering her troops to fall back, to return to the dropships, to do anything. They did not respond. They simply stood there, weapons lowering, heads tilting back to look at the gray sky, as the song washed over them and took them away. In 3 minutes, 5,000 soldiers were gone. Jethro's hands shook as she gave the order for orbital bombardment. She did not care about collateral damage anymore. She did not care about taking slaves or capturing resources. She just wanted to destroy whatever was down there before it could reach her. Her ship's weapons fired. Beams of energy that could crack continents lanced down toward the surface of the Earth. The planet ate them. There was no other way to describe it. The energy hit the atmosphere and then bent, twisted, spiraled downward as if pulled by some invisible force. It struck the ground and was absorbed, swallowed, devoured by something beneath the surface that had been waiting to be fed. Jethro stared at her screens in disbelief. Her weapons had done nothing, less than nothing. The surface of the planet was undamaged. The city stood intact. The humans who had been watching from windows and doorways had not moved. Then every speaker on her ship activated at once. A child's voice, sweet and innocent and absolutely wrong, spoke words that would haunt her for the rest of her very short life. "You woke us up." That wasn't very nice. Her crew began to scream. Jethro turned to see them clutching their heads, clawing at their skulls, as something invisible moved through their minds. She could feel it too, pressing against her consciousness. Curious and ancient and vast beyond comprehension. She understood, in that final moment, what the quarantine had really been for. The humans were not the threat. The humans were containers, shells, masks worn by things that had existed before the stars were born. Jethro activated her personal recorder. If she was going to die, she would leave a warning for anyone who came after her. Her voice remained calm even as her crew collapsed around her, even as she felt her own mind beginning to crack under the weight of what was touching it. "They're not what they appear to be," she said. "The bodies are just containers. The things inside them are old, older than the galaxy. They came here to hide, to sleep, to forget what they were. They made themselves small and fragile and mortal because they wanted to remember what it felt like to be afraid. They forgot themselves on purpose." She paused, feeling knowledge pour into her brain like fire. "But we woke them up, and now they're remembering." The last thing Commander Jethro felt before she disappeared was not fear. It was wonder. She finally understood what she had spent her whole life searching for, without knowing it. She finally understood what the universe truly was, and then she was gone, and her ship hung silent in orbit, and the humans below continued their lives as if nothing had happened at all. Admiral Vorath received Commander Jethro's final transmission as his armada approached the inner part of the Sol system. He watched it 17 times, and each time he understood less than before. The recording showed Jethro's bridge crew going mad. They screamed and tore at themselves as if trying to escape their own bodies. Something was moving through them. Something invisible. Something that his sensors could not detect. One by one, they fell, and one by one, they vanished, leaving behind only empty uniforms and dropped weapons. Jethro stood longest. Her voice remained calm even as whatever was happening to her crew began to happen to her. She spoke of ancient things wearing human bodies like costumes. She spoke of sleepers who had chosen to forget. She spoke of things that made no sense to a military commander who believed only in power and conquest. Then, at the end, she laughed. Not the laughter of madness, but something else. Something that sounded almost like joy. Vorath deleted the recording. He told himself that Jethro had gone insane, that her ship had encountered some kind of weapon that affected the mind. The humans must have developed something beyond what the hegemony's intelligence had predicted. It was the only logical explanation. He gave the order for a full fleet assault. All 300 warships, all weapons firing, all focused on the small blue planet that hung in the darkness like a drop of water. He would burn this world to ash. He would leave nothing alive, nothing capable of threatening his forces. Then he would report to the hegemony that the quarantine had been justified after all, and he would recommend that Sol system be permanently sterilized. The fleet opened fire. For a moment, Space itself seemed to burn. Energy beams and missiles and particle weapons streaked toward Earth, enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. Voreth watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. Nothing could survive this bombardment. Nothing. Then the universe blinked. There was no other way to describe it. Reality stuttered, like a heart skipping a beat. The stars seemed to flicker. The fabric of space itself twisted and folded in ways that should have been impossible. When the blink ended, Voreth's fleet was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. The ships did not explode or disintegrate. They simply ceased to exist between one moment and the next. One instant, 300 warships filled space around Earth. The next instant, that space was empty, as if no fleet had ever been there at all. Voreth found himself floating in nothing. His flagship was gone. His crew was gone. His body was gone. He existed only as a point of awareness in infinite darkness, unable to move, unable to scream, unable to do anything except think. A voice spoke to him. It was not a single voice, but millions of voices speaking together. Human voices and alien voices, and voices that belonged to no species he had ever encountered. You have been removed, the voices said. Not killed. Removed. The universe no longer contains any record of your existence. Your homeworld does not remember you. Your empire does not remember you. You are a thought that was never thought, a life that was never lived. Voreth tried to speak, but he had no mouth. He tried to think of words, and somehow the voices heard him. Why? He asked. Because you tried to harm our children, the voices replied. The humans are ours. We made them. We became them. We love them, and we will not allow anyone to hurt them. Understanding began to dawn in whatever remained of Voreth's consciousness. The records, the warnings, the ancient quarantine. It had never been about protecting the galaxy from humans. It had been about protecting the galaxy from what lived inside humans. What are you? He asked. We are the architects, the voices said. We built this universe. We wrote its laws. We created its stars and planets and all the life that fills them. And when we grew tired of being infinite, we came here to be small. We put ourselves inside human bodies so that we could forget what we were. We wanted to know what it felt like to be afraid, to hope, to love, to die. We wanted to be real. The darkness around Voreth shifted. He saw things that his mind could not process. He saw the birth of stars and the death of galaxies. He saw beings of pure thought shaping reality like clay. He saw those same beings compressing themselves, shrinking themselves, pouring themselves into tiny, fragile bodies on a tiny, fragile world. We have slept for millions of years, the voices continued. We have lived billions of lives. We have been farmers and warriors and artists and fools. We have experienced every joy and every sorrow that mortal existence has to offer. And we were happy. We wanted to sleep forever, to forget forever, to become truly human and leave our old selves behind. Then we came, Voreth said. Then you came, the voices agreed. And you threatened our children. You threatened the world we chose for our long sleep. You forced us to remember what we are. The darkness began to crush inward. Voreth felt his awareness shrinking, compacting, being pressed down into a smaller and smaller point. We do not enjoy killing, the voices said. We created life because we loved it, but we will protect what is ours. Tell the others, if you can. Tell them that Sol System is not to be touched. Tell them that humanity is not to be harmed. Tell them that we are awake now, and we are watching. The last thing Admiral Voreth experienced was not death. It was something worse. He was being rewritten, his entire existence edited like a mistake in a document. He had never been born. He had never conquered worlds. He had never led a fleet to Sol System. He had never existed at all. Far away, at the edge of the engagement zone, a single small courier ship survived. Its crew had been too far from Earth to be caught in the rewriting. They had watched through their sensors as 300 warships simply winked out of existence. They had received the final transmission from the fleet's communication systems before it vanished. The message was written in symbols that predated the current universe. When the ship's computer finally translated it, the crew went mad with fear. But one of them, a navigation officer named Talvex, managed to input coordinates back to hegemony space before his mind broke completely. The courier ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying with it a warning that would change the galaxy forever. On Earth, 8 billion humans looked up at the sky for a single moment, united by a feeling they could not explain. Then the moment passed, and they returned to their lives, unaware of what had just happened in their name. But somewhere deep inside each of them, something ancient smiled. The children were safe, for now. The courier ship arrived at the capital world of the hegemony 3 days after escaping from Sol System. By that time, only one crew member was still alive. Navigation Officer Talvex had locked himself in the engine room and refused to come out. The others had died from something that the medical systems could not identify. Their bodies showed no wounds, no disease, no poison. They had simply stopped being alive, as if their souls had decided to leave. When security forces finally cut through the engine room door, they found Talvex sitting in the corner, staring at nothing, speaking words that made no sense. They brought him before the emergency council of the hegemony, and he told them everything. He could not stop talking, even as his body began to fail, even as his cells slowly broke apart in ways that medical science could not explain. He spoke. The things he had witnessed demanded to be shared. They were the architects, Talvex rasped to the assembled leaders. The old stories are true. Every creation myth, every legend about gods who shaped the universe, every tale of beings who existed before existence itself, those were all memories of them. Real memories, passed down through species that no longer exist, about things that actually happened. The council members listened in stunned silence. Some of them did not believe him. Some of them thought he had gone mad. But his ship's sensors had recorded everything. The footage showed 300 warships vanishing in an instant, erased from reality as if they had never existed. The hegemony's scientists could not explain what they were seeing. The footage broke every law of physics they knew. Ships did not simply disappear. Matter could not be created or destroyed. Existence was not something that could be edited. Except, apparently, it was. Talvex continued his story until he could no longer speak. His final words were a warning. They are not sleeping anymore. They are waking up, and they have to decide what to do with us. The Galactic Concord convened an emergency meeting for the first time in 4,000 years. Representatives from every major species gathered on the neutral station at the center of known space. They shared information, compared records, and tried to make sense of what was happening. The ancient files about Sol System were finally unsealed. What they contained terrified everyone who read them. Long ago, before the current universe had finished forming, beings called the architects had existed. They were not gods in any religious sense. They were something stranger. They had designed reality itself. They had written the laws of physics, created the fundamental forces that held matter together, seeded the cosmos with the potential for life. For billions of years, they had watched their creation grow and change. They had been proud of what they built. But eventually, something changed. The architects grew tired. Being infinite and immortal and all-powerful was exhausting in ways that mortal beings could never understand. They wanted rest. They wanted peace. They wanted to forget the terrible weight of being responsible for everything that existed. So they came to Earth. They chose a young species, barely evolved, full of potential but not yet aware of its place in the universe. They compressed themselves into human bodies. They divided their vast consciousness into billions of tiny pieces and poured those pieces into fragile mortal shells. Then they forgot. They forgot what they had been. They forgot what they could do. They lived human lives and died human deaths, only to be reborn as new humans, each cycle forgetting more and more of their true nature. They experienced fear and pain and hope and love, all the things that immortal beings could never truly know. They had been happy. For 200,000 years, they had been happy, until the hegemony shattered their dream. Now, across Earth, the sleepers were waking up. Most humans felt nothing more than strange dreams, odd moments of knowledge they could not explain, brief flashes of memory that seemed to belong to someone else. But some, those who had been architects the longest, whose forgetting ran the deepest, began to fully remember what they were. A school teacher in Japan was grading papers when she suddenly looked up at her students and saw them differently. She remembered designing the nuclear forces that held their atoms together. She remembered deciding how strong those forces should be, how tightly they should bind matter, how much energy they should release when broken. Her hands shook as she realized that she had created the laws that made her students possible. A fisherman in Brazil cast his net into the ocean and froze. He remembered seeding these waters with the first organic molecules 4 billion years ago. He remembered watching with joy as those molecules combined and grew and evolved into the fish that now swam beneath his boat. Tears streamed down his face, and he did not know why. An elderly woman in Nigeria held her newborn great-grandchild in her arms and began to weep. She finally understood something she had wondered about her whole life. She remembered making the decision that entropy would exist, that all things would end, that nothing could last forever. She had done this on purpose, because she understood that without death, life had no meaning. Without endings, beginnings were worthless. Without loss, love was impossible. She held that tiny baby and wept because she had created death, and death meant that someday this child she already loved would cease to exist. She had done this to herself. She had done this to everyone. Across the galaxy, other species began to have dreams. Strange dreams, vivid dreams, dreams about a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. They dreamed of human faces and human lives and human struggles. They dreamed of beings who had chosen to become small and weak because they wanted to understand what it meant to be alive. The architects were communicating, not through words or signals, but through the fabric of reality itself. They were spreading a message to every conscious mind in the universe. The message was simple. We are awake. We are remembering. And soon, we will have to make a choice. The Galactic Concord debated what to do. Some argued that they should attack Earth before the architects fully awakened. Others said that any attack would be futile, that beings who could rewrite reality could not be harmed by weapons. A few suggested sending an embassy, trying to communicate, trying to find a peaceful solution. In the end, they chose diplomacy. Not because they believed it would work, but because they had no other options. The hegemony's fleet had been erased from existence. Nothing in their arsenal could compete with that kind of power. They prepared a delegation, gathered representatives from every major species, and sent them toward Sol System. They went to beg for the galaxy's survival. They had no idea what they would find when they arrived. The delegation's ship entered Sol System slowly, carefully, with all weapons powered down and all shields inactive. They broadcast messages of peace on every frequency, in every language, hoping that something would hear them and understand that they meant no harm. Earth looked the same as it always had. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling across its surface. From a distance, it seemed like any other inhabited world, unremarkable and ordinary. But as they drew closer, the delegates began to see that something was wrong. The planet flickered. There was no other way to describe it. Reality itself seemed uncertain around Earth, as if the universe could not quite decide what was real and what was not. Cities appeared and disappeared. Mountains shifted position. The oceans changed color between one moment and the next. Time was broken too. The delegates' instruments showed that some parts of Earth were experiencing morning, while others were trapped in eternal midnight. Some areas aged years in seconds while others remained frozen in single instants that stretched on forever. The boundary between thought and matter had become thin. One delegate looked out the window and saw his childhood home floating in Earth's atmosphere, exactly as he remembered it, summoned into existence by the mere act of his remembering. They landed in what had once been a city. The name did not matter because the city no longer existed on any map. It was a place that the architects had created specifically for this meeting, built from memory and dream and the raw stuff of possibility. At the center of this impossible place, in a garden filled with flowers that had never existed in nature, 3 figures sat at a simple wooden table. They looked human, mostly, but something about them made it difficult to focus. Looking at them was like trying to read a book while someone kept changing the words. One appeared to be an elderly woman with kind eyes and hands worn by years of work. One looked like a child, no more than 7 or 8 years old, with a smile that contained no innocence. One was a man whose eyes showed galaxies spinning in their depths, stars being born and dying in the time it took to blink. They welcomed the delegates with warm hospitality, offering tea and small cakes that tasted like memories of happiness. "We have been waiting for you," the elderly woman said. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." The delegates sat, though some of them could barely control their trembling. They were in the presence of beings who had created the universe. Every law of physics, every star, every planet, every living thing that had ever existed was the work of the minds sitting across from them. "We have been debating," the woman continued. "It has been difficult. We have been human for so long. We love being human. The fear, the uncertainty, the desperate hope that things will somehow work out. You cannot imagine how precious mortality is to beings who cannot die. One of the delegates, a senior diplomat from the Concord, found his voice. The hegemony, he began. What happened to them? The hegemony is irrelevant, the child said, still smiling that unsettling smile. They no longer exist. We did not destroy them. They simply never were. The universe has been edited. Every world they conquered has been restored. Every species they enslaved has been freed. Every act of cruelty they committed has been undone. The timeline remembers only peace where they brought war. The delegates exchanged glances. The hegemony had been one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Millions of soldiers, thousands of worlds, centuries of conquest, all of it erased as if it had never happened. Then what is there to decide? Another delegate asked. If you can simply remove anything that threatens you, what possible concern could you have? The man with galaxies in his eyes spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it resonated in ways that made the delegates' bones vibrate. You, all of you, the galaxy we created, filled with life we designed, governed by laws we wrote. We made you to be interesting. We wanted to watch you grow and struggle and evolve. We wanted you to surprise us. And then we wanted to join you, to be small and frightened and alive alongside you. He paused, and stars died in his eyes. But we have been reminded of what we are. The dream is ending, and we must decide what to do now. What are the options? The diplomat asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know. The elderly woman set down her teacup. We could return to sleep, forget again, more deeply this time. Let the humans who are truly human, not us wearing human shapes, continue their lives. But we might be woken again. Another invasion, another threat. The cycle could repeat forever. We could leave, the child added. Take the humans who are us, the ones who have begun to remember, and return to the void between universes. But that would mean abandoning this reality we worked so hard to create. Or, the man said slowly, we could simply stop. We wrote the laws of physics. We can unwrite them. If existence has become too troublesome, we can end it. All of it. Every star, every planet, every living thing. Peacefully, instantly. No one would suffer. You would simply cease. Between one moment and the next, silence fell over the garden. The delegates understood that they were not here to negotiate. They were not here to plead for mercy. They were here because the architects wanted to see them, to remember why they had created life in the first place. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the smallest delegate stepped forward. She was a Kelmathi, barely past adolescence, chosen for this mission because her species communicated through emotions rather than words. She could project feelings directly into the minds of others. She projected a single emotion at the three figures before her: gratitude, not fear, not desperation, not worship. Simple, honest gratitude for having existed at all. She was grateful for every moment of her brief life, every joy and every pain, every confusion and every clarity. She was grateful to the beings who had made her possible, even if they had done it without thinking of her specifically, even if she was just a tiny byproduct of their vast cosmic experiment. The three architects looked at each other. Something passed between them, a communication older than language, deeper than thought. The elderly woman smiled, and for a moment, she was not a being of infinite power. She was just a tired grandmother who had seen enough conflict for one existence. We will sleep again, she said. We will forget again. Deeper this time. More completely. The humans who are truly human will remain. They will grow. They will reach the stars someday. And perhaps they will become something new. Something we did not design. Something that can surprise us. She turned to face the delegates directly. Tell the galaxy. Sol system is no longer quarantined. Humanity is free to join you among the stars. Treat them well. Remember what sleeps inside them. She paused, and her next words carried the weight of eternity. We did not hide ourselves only in humans. We scattered pieces of ourselves across every sentient species in the universe. You are all our dreams. You are all our children. The garden began to fade. Reality reasserted itself. The impossible city dissolved into ordinary earth, into ordinary streets and ordinary buildings and ordinary humans living ordinary lives. The delegates returned to their ship in silence. They had been given a gift beyond measure, not just survival, but meaning. Every sentient being in the galaxy carried a fragment of the divine. Every act of creation, every moment of kindness, every struggle against despair was an echo of the architect's original purpose. The universe was not cold or empty or meaningless. It was a dream, dreamed by beings who had chosen to forget they were dreaming, so that the dream could become real. And humanity, those strange, fragile creatures on their small blue world, were the architect's greatest experiment. They had been gods who chose to become mortal. They had been infinite beings who chose to be finite. They had known everything and chosen to forget, so that they could have the joy of learning again. The message spread across the galaxy. Sol system was opened. Humanity was welcomed into the community of spacefaring civilizations, and everywhere, on every world, beings looked at each other differently than before. They were all children of the architects. They were all fragments of the dream. And somewhere, deep in the core of Earth, the sleepers smiled in their slumber and dreamed of the day when their children would finally grow up and take their place among the stars. The universe continued, not because it had to, but because beings of infinite power had decided it was worth preserving. That was the greatest gift of all.